Hello everyone, I have got to the point where I am super happy with my Spider-Man build and want to show you guys perks and gear you should be looking to get on your Spider-Man. Before we jump in, I do want to point out this build is more aimed at endgame players as a lot of the gear is from the elite trade and requires a decent amount of farming. I will however still show some alternative options you can get in the meantime. If you are just starting out building your Spider-Man, I will leave a link in the description for some builds that are more aimed at people just starting out. This build is for those players above 160 power who are trying to perfect their Spider-Man builds and want to know what I think works well. This build is mainly designed for the raid, but honestly, I use it everywhere. It's a perfect all-rounder that does it all. As you saw in the beginning, it works great in the OLT with some decent melee and ranged damage as well as good valor as well, so our heroics are still hitting super hard. With all that said, let's jump into it and look at our stats. So, this build is actually a hybrid that tries to make everything deal good damage instead of limiting ourselves to only melee or ranged. As well as being actually good, it's actually much more fun to play this way as you get to use everything Spider-Man has to offer. So, as you can see, might and precision are still high with a slight focus on might, as I do lean towards melee more, but I like having the webs still hit for decent damage. I will also make a disclaimer that I don't use these stats for everything in the game. I switch gear and artifacts around as I play. I am showing my main stats, but for certain parts of the raid I might change my artifact to something with more resolve and resilience. Proficiency can always be pretty low on Spider-Man. I have explained in previous videos why Spider-Man doesn't need a whole lot of proficiency due to all the perks and abilities he has that greatly increase our crit rate. For anyone who doesn't know, Spider-Man has skills and abilities that give him crit rate. It's mainly from his ultimate and webbing enemies up that gives you tons of extra crit chance, and you can actually get his crit chance all the way to 100 with the right setup. I'll leave a link for anyone who wants a full breakdown in the description. I will point out that while I can get away with using 0 proficiency, I am champion level 300, so I have all the skills for crit chance and perk chance as well as a decent collection of comic cards. So, depending on your setup, you may want to add 50 or so proficiency if you feel like it's too low for you. Valor is our highest stat as it buffs both our ranged and melee damage and also our heroics. Even without using Spider-Man's drone perk that adds status damage to the drone, it can still deal a serious amount of damage, so valor is super important in this build. I have my resolve at 81, which offers more than enough health for my skill level and playstyle, and then our resilience is actually at 0. While I find this fine for me, as mentioned, there is times where I will change an artifact to add an extra 60 resolve and resilience for some of the harder parts of the game. But for the majority of content, Spider-Man in my opinion doesn't need a whole lot of defense due to him always doing takedowns, and even the drone can act as form of protection, shooting and stunning, even webbing up enemies that are near you, giving Spidey a lot of breathing room. So, I can get away with a small amount of defenses, but as always you may want more of this depending in your skill level and playstyle. Finally, we have our intensity at 0. Having a bit here wouldn't be a bad idea, but for the hybrid build to work I needed to sacrifice something, so on top of the resilience we have 0 intensity. As you will see, our vibranium mainly comes from payloads that instantly apply the status to most enemies, and Sonic is our second status that applies really quickly anyway and is on an attack with loads of hits, making intensity just not really needed. We also don't need to stun enemies to do takedowns, so for this build it's not needed. I usually explain by builds left to right, but I think with this build I need to explain things a little bit different. You get these from the raid, and it's the golden piece of gear that makes this build really good is this artifact with pinpoint vibranium payload. It gives us a chance to apply vibranium status from ranged attacks on a perk from our artifact slots. This alone is amazing, but it also can activate on Spider-Man's heavy combo finisher where he spins around shooting webs everywhere. This lets us actually deal battery damage from a single attack. One of Spider-Man's biggest weaknesses is that he can't apply status very quickly, so when you are in the raid, getting vibranium on the enemies can be a pain, especially if you want to play more of a melee build. This artifact lets you shoot a couple of webs and have a chance to just instantly apply vibranium with a payload, or use a heavy combo finisher where each web shot has a chance to activate a payload. If we jump back to our slot 1, we have this piece from the Elite Raid that deals sonic damage on our heavy combo finishers, which gives us this crazy chance for automatic battery damage off a single attack. I should also point out their heavy combo finisher damage scales off precision, hence why a hybrid build is so effective. Lethal Conduit is nice for your team but not doing a whole lot for us, so receiving magnifier could be better here. Blaring Shake is a bit interesting, as I didn't think much of it when I first read it, but it actually helps stop some of the bigger enemies push through your heavy combo finisher and hit you out of it. Not 100% needed, but actually ends up being sort of useful sometimes. Next, we have the ranged slot, and it's pretty standard. Precision, Might and Valor, perfect stats for our hybrid build, with web shooters dealing vibranium and a faultless buff so we can get our damage buff. This is pretty much perfect for our builders, even if on the small chance our payload doesn't activate or fully apply, we can use our web shooters instead. This might take a while to farm getting these exact perks. Sonic instead of vibranium would be fine here, even though I prefer vibranium. It's much easier to apply this from range and then go in for melee damage after. For stats you do ideally want exactly what I have here, but settling for either Might and Valor or Precision and Valor would be fine, just not completely optimal. You do always want the Valor though, because losing any amount of Valor is going to affect our melee ranged and drone damage, so that is the primary stat we are looking for. Our defense slot is the only non-raid gear we have, and it's got great stats for starters and a reactive damage buff with proximity armor. The reactive buff is super nice as it can activate during takedowns and when using abilities, which is a large amount of time when we are playing Spidey. While the reactive buff isn't totally needed, I find having that second way to activate it just ensures we have it activated most the time. Proximity armor is also a great perk I don't see a lot of people use, but in the raid, when you are side by side punching claw or defending points, you basically have this defense buff without a timer. Before the raid this perk was definitely not as useful, but you spend so much time shoulder to shoulder with your team in the raid, it's actually really good. It also activates when Spider-Man is near his drone. I will leave some harm room gameplay at the end where you can see it activating even though I am solo. There is some raid gear like 25% extra damage against enemies with vibranium that would be better, but after the comic nerf we need some resolve so we can take a couple of hits, and unfortunately that stat doesn't drop on the raid gear. Finally, we have our slot 4. Again, for the stats we have Valor, Might and Precision and some decent perks, but this is what I would say is the most optional piece in the build. The leak does activate pretty often, but I find it very situational. It's a nice thing to see when it activates, but is not that important to the build. The main reason other than the stats is the granting contender. This works great with our sonic heavy combo finishers. As we will become a sender from the bottom perk giving me a 20% melee damage buff. This doesn't seem to affect the actual heavy combo finisher, but does beef up our takedowns and melee hits. I am trying to swap this for a different raid perk that you can see here. Spider's Destruction gives us a 25% increase to damage, stun and status. This will be a lot more noticeable, as making yourself a sender with the sonic element is kind of difficult and only lasts 10 seconds. This perk will be a lot better when I can get one with the correct stats. While the new perk won't work on bosses, it will be much better for general mobbing and I can switch between the two. We have already gone over the pinpoint payload artifacts, so for our other slot I bounce between a couple of different artifacts to suit what I am playing. This triple Valor with Aerial Breaker I tend to activate the heavy combo finisher from the air, so the extra 12% damage is nice here, and what I use when I am trying to push my damage as high as possible, like against the OLT. You can get this from vendors or anywhere that drops artifacts. Then I jump between two different types of Cosmic Surge artifacts. You get both of these from either the OLT or DNA chests in the vaults. First is this one with Might, Valor and Proficiency with a lethal Cosmic Surge. I like to use this one in easier content where I don't need to stack my damage as high and can kill enemies really quickly, letting the Cosmic Surge artifact go off, adding some nice healing and heroic regen. On the opposite side, when I am going up against the elite trade version of Claw where he can kill you in the blink of an eye, now the comics are gone, I equip this reactive Cosmic Surge artifact with some much needed extra resolve and resilience, and having the Cosmic Surge be reactive instead helps keep me alive. For major artifacts it's pretty much what you would expect on every build. Use the ring for mobbing and the Nord Stone for bosses. Before we jump into the skill tree, I just want to highlight some other pieces of gear you could swap into this build or want to keep in mind when grinding gear with Spiderman. Some of these are just encounter specific, but wanted to highlight them all at the very least. I have not added the little infographic for these as they are not really part of the main build and just some different options. I already did a video showing off these perks that give you around 2% extra heroic energy, but that 2% ends up giving you a whole boatload of extra heroic energy, and it is more like giving you triple heroic energy. I will leave a link in the description of me doing a last Avengers standing speedrun using this piece where I can just spam heroics over and over for anyone that would like to see this piece in action. I am mainly using this piece at the moment, however I don't want to lump it in with this build as Alex K, the developer in charge of gear, told people to enjoy it while we can, so I have a feeling it may get tweaked a little bit. So, if you have one, go crazy as it's super fun, but don't build your character around it as it may not be here for long. For the slot 1 you can also use something like this to attach in Surge to your build. It will push the damage of your heavy combo finisher a little bit further, but to me it's not worth losing Sonic, which is probably the best cold element especially for Spider-Man. This one also has some pretty bad stats as our Precision, Might and Valor combo would be better. With damage buff maybe getting toned down a bit, keeping something like this in mind may be a good idea. Also, having a ranged piece with targeted damage buff to switch to can let Spider-Man deal some decent damage in the Shurian counterpart of the raid. With this build, just changing to this ranged piece can let me deal around 50k a web shot to the Vibranium clusters, which while still not Hawkeye or Iron Man levels makes him at least be able to help. I do combine that with this slot 3 that has some Precision and Valor on it with the reverberation drive on it. With the Vibranium payload artifact, this can give us a nice damage bonus. Be on the lookout for gear like this. Another piece is this reactive Jarvis barrier slot 3. For those of you that like to play with a bit more defense, something like this is super strong. This piece gives us more resolve and resilience, and my role here has a Jarvis barrier and 2 potential defense buffs. This piece packs a whole busload of survivability in one piece. I used this on my first ever elite raid and didn't go down once, even though I was 160 and never played the elite before. It's super strong. Then finally we have the Public Menace visor. This exotic drops from last Avengers standing, and the last perk Dramatic Taunt can actually be super helpful. For both fights against Claw, Spider-Man can take the aggro of the mobs, helping your team a ton. It also lets you produce a whole lot more orbs for your team. This is the perfect support piece. Finally, let's cover some skills. Starting off, you want to be using high emissions. I know it can be tempting to get the healing option, but it's really not needed, and using high emissions will increase the damage of the drone by a lot and give Spider-Man some huge crowd control damage. You want to combine this with special delivery, as this will let you produce a huge number of heroic orbs for you and your team. However, Class Clown can still be great for bosses as the taunt will work on them. I like using the web retraction for grouping up mobs to hit them with the ultimate or bring them closer to my drone. Combines with the extra damage. The 20% cooldown is not really needed when you can produce so many orbs with Spider-Man, so I prefer the extra damage. Either one is fine though. The Spider Signal is my preferred ultimate to add some healing orbs into the mix for you and your team. Combined with the extra length on defeating enemies. Then in the mastery tree we are focusing on all the skills that up our critical chance or damage. We definitely want to be producing heroic orbs on takedowns as we want our drone and wrecking ball up as much as possible. In the ranged tree you may as well go for the extra damage and web tether perks, but it's personal preference. The charged range attacks are all pretty bad, so use whatever. For the webbed status tree, we want more of the same. Damage, crit chance and heroic orbs. The last 3 perks here are bugged and giving us double skills, but this skill at the end giving us 30% damage resistance is the only standout here anyway. I hope you enjoyed this build breakdown, and if you did, be sure to like and subscribe. I will let this brutal harm room gameplay play in the background, but if you have any questions about this build, be sure to leave them in the comments below. I also have a Discord you can join full of people willing to help. Finally, you can follow me on Twitter and get in touch with me there. I'll leave all the links for these in the description below. If you want to see any more gameplay for this build, I'll leave everything from the OLT, raids and harm rooms in the description below. Peace out and thanks for watching.